He saved a seat for someone who never came back. Not in a stadium, not at a fancy restaurant, just in a small, tired diner on the side of a highway, at a table by the window that no one was ever allowed to touch. Tom had been opening this place for decades. Same neon sign, same squeaky door, same cheap coffee that somehow tasted better at 2 in the morning than it ever did at 2 in the afternoon. But if you watched closely, you'd see one thing that never changed. No matter the season, no matter the day, that table. Every morning, before the first trucker walked in, before the first pot of coffee finished brewing, Tom went straight to the table by the window. He laid out the silverware with careful hands. Fork on the left, knife on the right, glass, spotless, at the top corner. Napkin folded just so, centered perfectly. He didn't rush it like the others. This wasn't habit. This was ritual. From the counter, Mia noticed it on her very first week. She was new, 22. Hair always tied up in a messy ponytail, apron permanently stained with coffee and ketchup. She'd taken the job because rent doesn't care about your dreams, and the diner was hiring. At first, she thought Tom was just particular, old school. But the longer she worked there, the stranger that one table started to feel. Truckers came and went. Families with cranky kids stopped in on long drives. Couples argued quietly over cold fries. Every seat in the diner saw someone, except that one. If a customer tried to sit there, Tom moved fast. "Sorry, folks," he would say, gentle but firm. "This one's reserved. Take any other you like." Reserved? For who? No one ever showed up. One slow afternoon, when the lunch rush had faded and the highway had quieted, Mia finally asked. Tom was refilling sugar packets. She was wiping down the counter, even though it was already clean. "Hey, Tom," she said, nodding toward the window. "What's the story with that table? VIP ghost I should know about?" Tom didn't laugh. He followed her gaze, and for a moment, his expression changed. The lines around his eyes deepened, not from age, but from something heavier. "I promised I'd keep it ready," he said. "For who?" she asked. Tom hesitated. His thumb pressed down on a sugar packet so hard the paper crinkled. "For my son," he replied. The answer landed quietly, like a plate being set down in an empty room. Mia swallowed. "Does he come here a lot?" "Hasn't been here in years," Tom said. "But if he ever walks through that door again, I want him to know there's still a place for him." After that, the table wasn't just strange, it was heavy. Mia learned the rest in pieces. A comment here, a hint there. Truckers who'd been stopping by for years filled in some of the gaps. Tom had an only son, smart, restless. The kind of kid who looks at a small town and only sees the edges of a cage. Tom's father had owned the diner before him. In his mind, it was simple. His dad passed it down to him, and one day, he'd pass it down to his boy. That's how you honor where you come from. That's how you keep a family together. But his son wanted something else. A bigger city, a different job, a life that didn't smell like grease and coffee. One night, it boiled over. They sat at that table by the window. The son tried to talk. The father tried to control. Words piled up on top of each other until one phrase cut through all the rest. "If this life isn't good enough for you," Tom had said, anger sharp in his voice, "maybe you're not my son." Silence. A beat where he could have taken it back. He didn't. The boy got up, left some cash on the table, looked at Tom with eyes full of hurt and something worse. Disbelief. "Then I guess I'm nobody to you," he said. The door closed behind him. The bell jingled like it always did, but the sound never stopped echoing for Tom. He thought the boy would come back in a day, a week, after he cooled off. He left the plate there that night. Fork, knife, glass with a ring of milk at the bottom. He told himself he would leave it exactly like that until his son returned. But mornings come, and plates start to smell, and life forces you to move, even when your heart doesn't. So Tom cleaned the table and made a different promise. If his son ever came back, that seat by the window would be ready, set, waiting. Like the argument never happened. Years slipped by. Customers changed. Staff changed. The world outside the diner moved on. Inside, Tom kept his promise. Mia watched as he did it day after day. Sometimes she thought it was sweet. Sometimes she thought it was heartbreaking. Sometimes it just made her angry, because her own father had left without leaving any seat open at all. No table, no promise, just absence. On the night everything changed, the weather was ugly. Rain slammed against the windows. The neon sign flickered like it was tired of pretending the diner was a bright place. By 10 o'clock, the booths were empty. The last customer left a few crumpled bills under a coffee cup and hurried out, jacket over his head. Mia was wiping down the counter. Tom was in the back washing pans. The bell above the door rang too loud in the quiet. A man stumbled in, shaking rain from his jacket. Early 30s, short dark hair, light stubble. The kind of face that would have looked younger if life had been kinder. "Sorry," he said, catching his breath. "You still open?" "Yeah," Mia replied. "Barely. Sit anywhere you like." He glanced around, then walked straight to the window, to the table, to the seat that had been waiting for years. Before Mia could say anything, he'd already dropped his backpack and sunk into the chair, shoulders sagging with exhaustion. She froze for a heartbeat, coffee pot in hand. "Tom?" she called. "We've got a customer." Tom pushed through the kitchen door with that same rag he always carried. He looked the way he always looked at closing time, worn, ready to go home, half married to the idea of sleep and half married to the diner. Then he saw the table. He stopped walking. The rag slid from his hand and hit the floor. The stranger looked up. Their eyes met. Up close, the resemblance wasn't subtle. Same jawline, same flicker of stubbornness in the brow, same eyes. Tom's heart knew what his mind was too afraid to say. "Coffee?" Mia asked, voice uncertain. The stranger nodded. "Yeah, black. Thanks." Tom stepped closer, each footstep echoing more than it should. "You can sit anywhere else," he said quietly. "That table is reserved." The man gave a tired half smile. "Yeah," he said. "I heard something like that." Tom studied him. Every line, every scar time had left. "Do I know you?" he asked. The man's jaw tightened. His fingers curled around the warm mug Mia set down. "Maybe," he said. "You used to." Silence settled over the diner like another layer of rain. Mia backed away, not because she didn't care, but because she understood this was one of those moments people carry for the rest of their lives. Tom pulled out the chair opposite the stranger and sat down slowly. For a while, they didn't talk about the years. They didn't talk about who was right, who was wrong, or who had suffered more. They talked about coffee, about how the highway hadn't changed much, about nothing, and yet about everything. Eventually, the stranger, Ethan, told his side. How he'd spent months, then years, convincing himself he couldn't come back until he had something impressive to show for his absence. A job, a degree, money, a story that justified the pain. How every time he failed, the distance between him and the diner felt bigger. Then one day, he heard a story from a trucker in some nowhere town about an old man who kept a table ready for the son who'd walked out. Ethan had laughed, said it sounded like something his father would do. The trucker shrugged. Places off Highway 17, little neon diner. Weird guy, good pancakes. Some things you call coincidence, some things you don't. Ethan got on a bus. Now here he was, sitting in the seat that had been waiting for him longer than he wanted to admit. "You kept it ready," he said quietly, eyes on the table. "I did," Tom replied. "Why?" Tom looked at his hands, the same hands that had thrown plates on counters and slammed doors and pointed fingers. "Because I didn't know how to do anything else," he said. "I didn't know how to say, 'I'm sorry.' So I kept setting the table and pretended that was enough." "It wasn't," Ethan said. "I know." Tom answered. The words hung there, fragile and honest. By the time Ethan left that night for a cheap motel down the road, nothing was fully fixed. But something had shifted. The next morning, the sky was clear. The diner breathed easier. Tom stood by the window table, looking at the crumbs, the coffee rings, the proof that the seat had finally done what it was meant to do: hold a person, not a fantasy. Mia approached with a rag in hand, waiting for the familiar instruction. "Want me to reset it?" she asked. "Make it perfect again?" Tom thought about all the years he'd spent polishing a symbol instead of healing a wound. "No," he said gently. "Not this time." He picked up the plate. She took the glass. Together, they wiped the table clean, not to erase the past, but to accept that it wasn't living here anymore. Later that day, Ethan walked in again. This time, there were no storms, no dramatic entrances, just a man coming in for breakfast at a place that knew his name before he said it. He glanced at the table by the window. It was empty, ordinary. 2 menus laid out instead of a shrine. "Is it okay if I—" he started. Tom nodded. "Yeah," he said. "Sit." They did. Father and son, not fixed, not perfect, but trying. Mia poured coffee and watched them talk. Really talk, for the first time in years. And somewhere inside her, a part of her own story felt a little less heavy, because that's the thing about the seats we save. Sometimes the person we're holding them for never comes back. Sometimes they do, and it still hurts. But sooner or later, we all have to decide. Are we going to keep living in that one moment when they left? Or are we finally going to clear the table, so there's space for something new? Tom didn't heal the past by keeping a table perfect. He began to heal when he allowed it to be used, to be messy, to be real again. And maybe, just maybe, there's a table in your life too. A memory, a grudge, a story you've been setting the same way for years. If there is, this isn't a demand to let it go. Just a gentle reminder. You deserve more than a life built around the day someone might walk back in. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is finally clear the seat you've been saving for too long.